Welcome to the April 2026 Governor Mills webinar series. We have these monthly leading up to the Governor Mills Opioid Summit, which is going to be July 16th in Bangor, Maine. And our next webinar, which we have another wonderful recovery-based topic, will be the first week in May, which we're not sure yet if it's going to be May 1st or May 8th, but we will send out more information on that. But today, I'm very excited to present the team from a Song for Charlie, Real Talk About Fake Pills. And they have a ongoing slogan of one pill can kill. And it's a really powerful story that's going to be presented by Ed Ternan and Marsha Taylor. I'll tell you a little bit about our presenters. Ed is the president of Song for Charlie. His professional background includes marketing, communications, product development, and project management. He's known as a pragmatic problem solver and has extensive experience building teams and managing strategic partnerships. Since Charlie's death, he has dedicated himself to informing young people about new risks of self-medication and recreational drug use in the age of synthetic drugs like fentanyl. And Marsha Taylor, strategy advisor for Strong from Charlie. Marsha is the former president and CEO of the Partnership for Drug-Free Kids and founder of MLT Strategies, a behavioral health consulting firm. Marsha has 30 years of public and private sector experience in the addiction field. She also created and ran the Medicine Abuse Project, a successful 5-year campaign to drive down teen misuse of prescription medicine, partnering with 8 government agencies, 15 corporations, and more than 80 nonprofits. It's amazing. And previously, she served as a senior advisor for drug policy and research for the Senate Judiciary Committee on Crime and Drugs, as well as Democratic staff director and international narcotics control, working for then Senator Biden. She's also worked for Senator Patrick Moynihan of New York and served as the Jesuit Volunteer Corps as a community organizer in Baltimore. So we've got great people with a really important cause. And at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Ed.
Thank you, Richard. And I'll start by thanking everyone on the call for showing up on what for many is a 3-day weekend, holiday weekend. And thank you to Governor Mills for having this summit and these webinars and inviting us to participate. It's a privilege to speak to everybody here today. I am going to do my best to share my screen, and Marsha and I will run through some slides. And so I'll count on you all to let me know that I'm doing this properly. Does that look good to everybody?
Yep.
Great.
You're all set.
Okay. So as Richard mentioned in his introduction, we are Song for Charlie. And I am really grateful to be joined today by Marsha. You heard Marsha's bio and background. We have been blessed in the 5+ years that we've been working here at Song for Charlie to attract really high-level, thoughtful partners and consultants and team members to help us put together our programs and address the issue of counterfeit pills and more broadly what we describe as the new chemical drug landscape. So Marsha will be making her comments in a second. What we'd like to do today is make sure you understand who Song for Charlie is and kind of I'll go through how we got started and how we come to be here. What we do, we've kind of evolved a business strategy in the last 5 years that's working, and we want to share with you what we do, the problem that we address, and kind of how we work, in the hope that some light bulbs will go on, and maybe we can think about ways to work with some of the folks in Maine as well, more directly. So sadly, Song for Charlie was formed out of tragedy. My wife, Mary, and I and our family lost our son at the very front end of this fake pill crisis in May of 2020. So our son Charlie went online. It was early COVID, and he got what he was told was a Percocet, which was a medicine that Charlie was familiar with from a back surgery he'd had previously. And so Charlie died shortly after taking this pill because it turned out to be one of these press pill counterfeit M30s made of fentanyl. And so Mary and I quickly realized that this was happening to other people and that Charlie really was a part of this new demographic being impacted by drug overdose and drug mortality, where traditionally we all know, and I know there's a lot of professionals in this audience, that traditionally someone who dies of a drug overdose would typically be further along in their journey with substances and probably maybe, a chronic user who accidentally overdoses on their drug of choice. But in late 2019 and early 2020, as the fentanyl that originally showed up in the drug supply in heroin and powders started to be pressed into these pills marked as medicines, we started to see young people dying suddenly and unexpectedly because they got something they thought was a medicine they were familiar with, and it turned out to be one of these fakes. So Mary and I started with very small ambitions. We said, let's form an organization, put up a little website, and just go tell kids and families that this is happening. Because in some sense, kids were at risk because they didn't know. They were dying from a lack of information. So we, with my background in marketing communications, we said, well, we can at least go tell the story and get the word out there. And so we did that. Song for Charlie began really focusing on social media posts and trying to put messaging where kids are. So school presentations, social media, that kind of stuff. Within a couple of years, thanks to a grant from the state of California, we developed a program for families and caregivers that we call the New Drug Talk. And that has done very well as well, where we extend our messaging out to community groups and community events and parent education and parent nights and so forth. La Nueva Drug Talk is our program for Spanish-speaking audiences. This is not a translation of the New Drug Talk. This is culturally relevant content created by a committee we put together of folks from the Latino community to help us develop the content that we would distribute. And that's part of the business model I mentioned that we've developed is we understand that our important message needs to get to a variety of different audiences and geographies and demographics. And so we have built kind of a core competence in tailoring our messaging in partnership with local folks to help make sure that it lands and sticks. And we can talk more about that. We are also the organization that puts on National Fentanyl Awareness Day. This year it's April 29th. We're hoping some of you will think of ways to get involved. There's a website that you can go to see all the different options we have for activating on April 29th, 2026. So, as I said, we are taking on this information gap, this knowledge gap out there, that we think that when it comes to upstream prevention messaging, addressing these pressed pills, that if we can get the information into the hands of young people and those who love them and care for them, that we can reduce mortality and reduce this risk simply by equipping people to make better decisions. So we've made a lot of progress since we started, and yet still our most recent survey, which is probably a year and a half or so old, almost half of young people still don't understand that there's fake pills out there that contain fentanyl. And on the other side of that coin, our research tells us that when they hear our simple, straightforward message, they do tend to say, I'm way less likely to go off script and get a pill. So we think this is a strategy that works, and part of our kind of go-to-market, if you will, is to help others take this message out to their audiences, including the topic of our conversation today. Our latest program that we're just rolling out is really trying to work with faith communities and leaders in faith communities because we think it's really important for them to understand this issue so they can support their folks. So just some examples of what we've done and how far we've come. We produce a lot of content. We started out doing a lot of in-person stuff. We still do. But in order to scale, we started producing short videos and a lot of social media posts. Um, and our messaging and our tone, which is, you know, not stigmatizing, it's not judgmental, it's just factual, actionable information about how things have changed so quickly, is really resonating. So, for instance, Los Angeles Unified School District, which is the second largest school district in the country, originally piloted our student film called Real Talk About Fake Pills. They put that out in 2024, and it reached about 175,000 middle school and high school kids during Red Ribbon Week that year. They have continued to push our content out each fall, and we now have a working relationship with New York City Public Schools doing the same, in addition to smaller school districts all over the country. Faith Communities is our latest program, community-specific program that we're rolling out thanks to a generous grant and support from Meta. And we have done a couple of pilot presentations at Santa Clara University, which is the Catholic university where Charlie passed away. And here in California, where we're based, some Catholic parishes and different faith communities here. And that's a program we really think is important and that we would love to try and get some traction with that. And in general, we've worked with other community organizations with this kind of train the trainer model, and including CASA and Homeboy Industries, where we are educating people who come in contact with and support young people, and in the case of CASA and Homeboy Industries, at-risk youth, to make sure that they understand how to have these conversations when the issues come up. And that's a big part of where we think we can support and scale as a national organization that does the research, gathers the data, talks to the experts, creates the content. We can then tailor it so we can distribute it in your local community in a way that really makes sense. And again, a little redundant here. We really think that getting information into the hands of people at the grassroots where they can take corrective action and make better decisions is the key to reducing this risk among the demographic we address, which is kind of people under 25, earlier, more upstream in their exposure to substances. And so if we can educate them and the people who educate them, then we can really make a big dent in this issue. And I think we all know we're starting to see the mortality numbers come down, especially steeply in that demographic. So we're encouraged that our strategy is working. And for a variety of reasons, we want to keep our foot on the gas and not let up. So real quick, let me go through several of the resources that we have that are available for you, kind of plug and play, turnkey. You can just go to our website or our YouTube channel and download these and use them today. So Real Talk About Fake Pills is about a 20-minute educational video documentary style that we created to scale our school presentation program. So we got to the point where demand for Song for Charlie folks to go out and speak in classrooms and high school assemblies, et cetera, just outstripped our ability to get everywhere. And so we created this film and a suite of curricular materials and classroom exercises around it. So the film is intentionally designed to snap into the basic classroom time, so at 20 minutes runtime. And when you go to this link, you will see the materials, exercises, activities, homework assignments, teacher guides around this film. So it can be really used by educators pretty easily in their classrooms to educate their students. Now, Counterfeit Pills You Need to Know is an earlier film that we produced that still hits all the high points, and it's about a 4-minute film. So it's really short and concise, and ends on a hopeful note, encouraging people to pull together and tell everyone about this new problem. And that we think is really ideal for instance, on National Fentanyl Awareness Day, for parents who just want to quickly go, hey, there's this new thing I've learned about. Let's watch this video together and share it with their kids or their family and hopefully start conversations. So we think that's a real useful asset as well. The New Drug Talk is a 30-minute documentary style film that we produced a couple of years ago. And that one was produced for parents and educators and caregivers with the idea that, our research showed that one of the challenges or hurdles that parents felt like they needed to overcome in talking to their kids about the new drug landscape is they just didn't have the confidence. They didn't feel like they knew enough about it to sound informed. And so we created this video, and I believe that if you watch that 30-minute video, you will come away with a deep understanding of the issue, how we got here, why it's happening, and feel very equipped to have informed conversations with folks. And La Estrella is our latest video production. You can see we're highlighting it here. We're very proud of it. La Estrella is groundbreaking in a couple of ways. Uh, First, it is the first Spanish language film with English subtitles, so it's Spanish first. And it addresses the impact of this crisis, the fentanyl crisis and fake pills specifically, on a Latino family in America. It's also groundbreaking in the sense that it is a narrative film. It's a drama. It's not a documentary. So it's a story. And we have won our first award from the film festivals that we have submitted this to. We've been accepted at, I believe, a dozen film festivals around the country. So we're kind of on our promotional tour with this film. The feedback from audiences has been fantastic. If you work at all with Latino audiences, I would encourage you to watch this film. We are having audiences express gratitude to us for depicting their community as also being victims of this crisis, where so often in popular culture, they feel like they're always depicted as like the bad guys, the perpetrators, the drug dealers, right? And this film talks about the impact on a Latino family of this crisis. The other interesting thing about this film is, unlike a documentary that kind of gives you answers, this film really raises questions. And like Real Talk About Fake Pills, we've developed classroom materials around it for panel discussions and use in schools and community events and so forth. And so we think this is a really useful tool. And again, we'd be happy to work with anyone who wants to use it to kind of do a train the trainer and walk through some of the things we've learned by screening the film. Okay. In general, I know that this audience understands the fentanyl crisis, but just to reiterate kind of what Song for Charlie is doing, we really believe that if we hit these 6 high-level points of information, data points, right? That number one, fentanyl is not a poison, it's a medicine. The dose makes the poison. It is too potent at 50 to 100 times stronger than heroin to be self-administered. It's only properly administered in medical settings where you're monitored, right? It's being found in these pills that look just like prescription tablets that you might be familiar with. It's also found in powders. A tiny amount can be lethal, especially if you don't have any tolerance. And there's no way to tell them apart from the real thing. If we make audiences, kids, caregivers understand these high-level things, that's enough for them to go, wow, I get it. Thanks for that. I'm going to avoid this as much as I can. And we've distilled all that down into, kind of a call to action, which is no random pills. For older audiences, when we talk to young adults and college-age students, we draw another red line. We say, if you want to really reduce your risk, the red line is no pills, no powders in 2026. When we're talking just about the fake pills, we say, listen, you know so deeply in your brain what you do before you cross the street, which is look both ways. It's a simple word slogan. No random pills is just as important in this day and age. You cannot take any medicine or tablet that doesn't come out of a bottle that has two names on it, yours and your doctor's, that you get from a legitimate pharmacy. Outside of that, the risk you're taking is huge. So it's high level messaging. We can drill down as deeply as our audience wants to go, but we start with this and we push this out far and wide. I'll finish with this and then turn it over to Marcia. As we move along, Song for Charlie is kind of expanding our scope as we move into the next 5 years. We've been doing this for 5 years now. And we are seeing, as you all are who are in this space, the issue evolve. And we intend to evolve with it. And as distributors of educational content, we know it's important to stay current and factual with the information that we're putting out there. So we're moving into building our research capabilities, our network of experts to stay up on the trends that are going on with all substances in this new chemical landscape that we're up against. And that includes things like kratom. We find that we get that question all the time, and there's people out there, parents and so forth, who've never heard of it. They don't know what it is. Well, we're developing content to address that gap. What's going on with cannabis, this super high potency cannabis out there that's also often promoted as kind of benign and harmless. And that, well, this is not your parents' weed. This is different, and parents and families need to know how to have a conversation about that when it seems we're living in an environment where families are confronted with the idea that we've kind of normalized taking some of these substances and still not normalized talking about the reasons people use substances or turn to substances and the real risks associated with all of these. So we are going to lean into the themes that go across all these substances that are characteristic of the new landscape, which is the convenience of tablets, the potency increase in all of these different substances, access via social media, and the sometimes deceptive marketing and positioning to young people. So that's where we're going. And we would love to work with you to co-develop these messages and stay up on what's going on and learn what's happening in your local area, and then see if we can develop content that works for you all. So I'm going to stop there, and hopefully I've left Marcia a little bit of time, and I'll go on mute, and Marcia, you can tell the folks about our latest program.
Great. Thank you, Ed. And thank you for everyone who is here today and will be watching the recording later. I just put my email address in the chat, and that is in response to everybody who wants to work with us. Feel free to reach out and shoot me an email so we can talk about more specifics. But as Ed mentioned, our newest offering is a toolkit specifically for faith communities. And part of the Song for Charlie ethos is really meeting people where they are. So Ed mentioned a couple of those spaces, schools, working with community groups like Homeboy Industries, service organizations like CASA, the Court Appointed Special Advocate. And we want to make sure that we are also incorporating faith communities. We know that when there's a problem, a lot of people turn to their minister, pastor, priest, rabbi for guidance and help with their family. We know that there are AA meetings happening in church basements all around the country. And we really feel like there's an opportunity for faith communities to be a voice for prevention as well. So I'm going to go through a little bit of this, but, as we were putting the toolkit together, we really thought this is sort of packaged for faith communities, but it really, the tools are equally applicable for all sorts of other community organizations too. So don't feel like if you're not representing a faith community today, that this is not for you. You could really download this toolkit and get all the ingredients you would need to be able to host any sort of an event for whoever your audience is. Oh, and I should mention we have the Meta logo up here. If you can just go back 1 second, Ed. This toolkit was made possible by our friends at Meta. When Ed and Mary first started Song for Charlie, they sort of had the Willie Sutton philosophy. And Willie Sutton was asked why he robbed banks, and he said, well, that's where the money is. For Ed and Mary, it was, why do you work with social media companies? Because that's where the kids are. That's where the audience is. That's how you get in front of a lot of people. So we're very grateful to our friends at Meta for helping create this toolkit. So, I think that for faith communities or any community, people might say, well, who's the audience here? Is it just, parents who think their kid might be experimenting? Is it just for kids who are kind of beginning to go out and drink and experiment with substances? We would argue that there are appropriate messages for every audience. So for elementary school kids, it's really about medication safety. It's about making sure they're not sharing their medications with other people, that only a responsible adult is giving them medication, and certainly about healthy coping mechanisms, that you don't take a medication to deal with some big feeling that you're having trouble handling. That's not a good way of handling it. Teaching them other ways to cope in a more healthy manner. For middle school, it gets a little more granular, and you want to make sure that those middle schoolers really understand pills. And Ed went through all those 6 messages about the fentanyl specifically. And for a lot of drug prevention, there is a very broad message. But with the fentanyl crisis, we really need to make sure we're getting specific, because it is so different from other substances. It's so different from what parents grew up with, because it looks like one thing and is really something else. We really need to make sure that kids are understanding things. So middle school is really the time to start with that specific messaging, and making sure that there is a healthy skepticism about medication that doesn't come from their parents, doesn't come from a medicine bottle, as Ed said, with their name on it and their doctor's name on it. And really, the how to connect section here, we really believe at Song for Charlie that it's not just what you say, but how you say it. So it's really having that open-ended conversation with kids, being curious about what they know, what they're seeing at school, trying to have an open dialogue rather than just sort of checking a box and saying, we've done the drug talk, now we can move on. It really needs to be an ongoing conversation, and involving everything from talking about feelings and how they're coping with them, to making sure that kids understand what the rules are in your family, what your expectations are of them, sort of setting the tone for, that new teen development really early. And then in high school, obviously, we know that the access that kids have to pills and other substances really increases dramatically. So again, making sure that they really have this as something that's front of mind when they go out, reminding them every time they leave the house, no pills, no powders, making sure that's a really clear line that you're setting with them. And again, really having those frequent conversations. And in high school, in middle school and high school, mental health is really fused into this conversation. I really think of them as 2 sides of the same coin. And you can't have the drug talk in a full and robust way without addressing a kid's mental health and how they're coping with substances. We know that people use substances either to feel good or to feel better. And the feel good sort of partying aspect, that curiosity, you need to kind of address that and address the why, and understand why kids might be turning to substances. But that feel better category, you really need to make sure that kids are not using substances as a coping mechanism, and really get to the root cause there. Oh, and then, I realized I didn't address the last bullet there. In high school and middle school too, it's really important to address family history. I think because of the shame and the stigma that goes along with substance use disorders, too often we don't talk about people in our family who have struggled with substances. And genetics aren't destiny, but kids really need to know, just like they need to know if there's a family history of cancer or heart disease, they need to know if there's a family history of addiction, because they are more at risk, and they need to be more careful. So really important to empower your kids with that information. So Ed mentioned the new Drug Talk film. We also have an audio series, again, meeting people where they are. We know that some people are going to sit down at their TV or at their computer screen and watch a 30-minute film. We know that other people may be on the go and are listening as they're driving back from dropping their kids someplace, or they're going on a walk. So we have an audio series as well that you can get from the Song for Charlie website. And then we also have peer-to-peer certification. We really want to empower kids to be able to educate their schools and their communities. So that is part of the Song for Charlie offerings. And then we also have a series of short videos on our website. So for those of you who work for community organizations, these are the type of videos that really can be used to be shared in social media or linked to in an email or a newsletter. So I encourage everyone to check those out and see if there are ones that really fit the educational goals that you have in your organization. And in addition, we have the articles that I don't think I've mentioned, the audio series, we have tip sheets, we have resources. So it's really a rich and robust array of resources. Again, meeting people where they are, giving people information in the way they like to consume it. So I encourage everyone to take a look and see if there are resources that could be helpful to you and to the people that you serve in Maine. And as Ed mentioned at the beginning, we know that there's hope in this. We know that kids who have been exposed to the Song for Charlie messaging and gone through our programs are 83% less likely to misuse pills. And that really is boiling it down to just empowering them with the information and having them understand the risks that are inherent in pills. So education, I think, oftentimes we see the overdose numbers. We feel like they're so immense that there's no way that one person can make a difference. But I would encourage people that there is hope in the work that we all do, that if you do spread this message, you do give kids that concrete information, they are going to be smarter about what they do. They're going to think twice. And it's really worth the time and effort, both for faith communities to get involved in this or any other community organization. And here is a QR code for our Faith Community Toolkit. I encourage everyone to take a look at it. I know in the chat, people have been asking for, where do I find the films and those sorts of things. They're all here on the Faith Community website. So on the toolkit. So if you can either go to other places on the Song for Charlie website, or you can just go here for one-stop shopping for all of the resources we talked about today. So with that, I think maybe we should see if there's some questions. Ed, anything you want to add before we do that?
No, Marcia, I don't think so, but I think I'll leave the QR code up there for a minute before I stop sharing so people can scan it if they want to.
Yeah, good idea. There's been several comments in the chat. I think the most important information right now, Marcia, maybe you could type in your email again in case anybody's arrived after the chat was created, and just assure everybody that they can reach out directly, follow up with the resources. I know your website itself is an action-packed array of information. So I think the encouragement is to reach out directly, utilize the website, the videos are on there, and then, in the coming days and weeks, Ed and Marcia could lead you into how they can be a resource in your particular communities, agencies, wherever it is, or personally. So a couple of things we talked about before that maybe we can circle back on without any specific questions yet. I answered one in the Q&A to Tori. We talked a lot about in the faith-based area some of the challenges of making sure that things are relevant, but how do you think a leader in a faith-based community can carry this message? What's the sort of the best case scenario that you've foreseen?
Want me to take that, Ed? Oh,
I'm
let's
just
see.
struggling to unmute, but yeah, why don't you go first, Marcia? We
Sure.
can share our thoughts.
I mean, I think the special sauce is when you educate kids and parents, um, at the same time. It doesn't have to be at the same event, but we've worked with school districts that have done this, and I think it's equally applicable for a faith community where perhaps a youth leader will have an education program for teens to make sure that they understand the risks, showing our film that is meant for the teen audience, and then someone else at the church would have an event for parents to make sure that they're aware of it. And I would just say, we all know it's hard to get parents to turn out for, and kids to turn out for a drug education night because everyone thinks not my kid. So I would think, talking about if the fentanyl crisis has directly impacted your community, reminding people that it's here and that it's a danger, that no one's immune to this, and it's not a judgment about anyone who is falling down this path. It's really just we need to make sure that we're all inoculated as a community with and given the same information so that we can all keep each other safe as possible.
Yeah, and I would add, Richard, that in our work, and Marcia has been in this space longer than I, and learned a lot of this from Marcia, is these are difficult conversations and difficult issues sometimes, and so it's often a challenge to push out the information. So we think a lot at Song for Charlie about how do people consume information today? And it's changing, right? With AI and all that kind of stuff coming. Um, and so one way as a faith leader to look at this is that you need to be ready. You need to be ready when the question comes to you. So it's not necessarily if you want to have an event or push information out to your people, your congregation, or whatever, that's great, and we encourage that. But I think a big part of it is making sure that faith leaders and their staff are informed and prepared for the question that may come. Um, because the other thing that we've learned is, and I think the research backs this up, is who are trusted messengers? And faith leaders are trusted messengers, just like doctors. So the expectation on faith leaders is that that your people come to you because they have that level of trust. And so where we can help maybe is to leverage that trust by making sure that when they come to you with a question about the new chemical drug landscape, you can say, number one, I have a pretty good understanding of that. And number two, here are some resources where you can go and dig deeper. So it's being ready for the question as much as it is kind of, pushing out programs and so forth.
Yeah, totally understand. That's a great point. So it came up earlier in your presentation itself, and in any conversation around this topic, is how do we help minimize stigma in this process, particularly with young people? What's been your experience with that?
And this time I'll go first because I'm on a roll, Marcia. Um, the, um, the how do we minimize stigma? And I think it's helpful to wrap in some of the reasons that people might use that feel good or feel better framing is really helpful to me. And I, in some of my talks to young people, will go way back in history and say, look, we as a species have always gone to the earth and taken plants and we process them and we use them for, you know, nutrition, medication, celebration, these types of things, right? So doing that is normal, but then there's that substance set and setting idea where the way we put things in our body has real impact for us, no matter what they are. And you can talk with young kids about like it's about sugar and it's about how that makes you feel. So you can kind of destigmatize it by broadening it and saying what you put in affects how you feel, both physically and mentally, emotionally. So be careful about what you put in. And what you should know is that there's certain things that are out there that even if people say they're fun or will make you feel better, they can be very, very dangerous. So it's not about people who engage in that behavior are bad. It's about more of a public health warning. What we know in prevention is you can't avoid a risk that you're unaware of, right? So it's really just saying to young people, there are sharks in the water. If you choose to go in there, just know that, right? So another thing I say to in my youth presentations is we talk about the new drug landscape is more like a minefield today, where in my day it was like a journey, right? You try some stuff that's normal. You're going to come across some stuff. And as you get older, you'll come to some accommodation, right? Some people say, I just prefer white wine. Everybody hates tequila eventually, right? We all learn that lesson. And you figure out what substances you're comfortable with and what you're not. Some people develop a problem with their substance of choice. There's In the old days, there were always off ramps and opportunities to intervene. And it was a journey, and you would have warning signs, and your friends would try to get you back on track. And the risk was one day down the line, you may accidentally overdose on your drug of choice. And that was the journey framing that I was taught when I was young. Today, the landscape is more like a minefield where your first, second, or third step out there could be your last. So I say to the kids, what's the first rule of minefields? Don't go in the minefield is the first rule, right? But the second rule is if you're going to go out there, you better know the lay of the land so that you can stay safe. So it's about information, not stigma. We kind of neutralize it the best we can, right? To just say, this is something you're going to come up against. And it's new to all of us. So we all need to talk about it.
Well said, Ed. Marcia, anything to add on that?
I think I covered, but one thing I think we're making a little bit of progress on the stigma front since the prescription drug epidemic took hold 15 years ago or whatever. And I think that when people realize how quickly someone can get into trouble with these substances, can develop a dependence and addiction, and the wheels start falling off. Um, I think we have a little more compassion as a society. I think that compassion was very late in coming, and I wish it had come earlier, and we still have miles to go. But I think the way we talk about, I think there's more discussion about it as a public health issue now than there used to be. It used to be 100% criminal justice and, lock them up, and these are bad people, moral judgment, and looking at it as a moral failing rather than a public health epidemic that needs to be tackled. So I think there's a little bit of progress, but obviously still miles and miles to go.
Always. We talked a little bit the other day. One of the things we often champion from the state government perspective are the pillars of recovery. We talk about it in the framework of the Gordon Smith's opioid response plan in general, and when we refer to that, it's referring to prevention, treatment, harm reduction, and recovery support. Share some experiences you've had of how your program, Song for Charlie, has impacted any and all of these, and in any ways that stand out, any success stories or memories of this process that's impacted a particular pillar.
Um, Boy, I love that question. And uh, and I will say I don't often lead with this, but I'm 10 years sober myself, so I have been through rehab. Um, I know that space a little bit. It is one of the things that I feel good about is Charlie saw me sober for 5 years before he passed. And so that's always he saw me on the downturn and also on the upswing, right? And he was proud of me, and I know that when he died because he told me that. So that's reassuring to me. I've been on the journey, and there's addiction in my family. Um, And so I understand the four pillars and the importance of them. And I think one of the things that helped Song for Charlie get going and get traction so quickly was that Mary and I started with a lot of questions. We didn't start our thinking about, do we even get active in this space? Do we do anything at all besides just heal as a family? We started with questions instead of kind of accusations and how could this have happened and who let this happen and who dropped the ball, that kind of thing. We were like, what's going on? And so we talked to law enforcement guys, we talked to harm reduction people, we talked to people from all stripes. And I was really struck by the fact that although some of these groups can be kind of adversarial sometimes, right? There are people of good faith in all of these groups, whether it's harm reduction, treatment, recovery, prevention, educational, and everybody wants to keep people safe and save lives. Um, and so I had really interesting conversations and lasting relationships that we've built and experts that we still draw on from those very early days. I started out very against fentanyl test strips. And I said, this is just not going to work. I don't believe it. And I talked to some folks and have completely turned around my understanding of the utility of those. While not perfect, the other thing I've learned is that there are the different tools of these four pillars apply to different audiences and constituencies, right? So fentanyl test strips are a very useful harm reduction tool in the right context. And so I really softened my position on that, right? So at high school presentations or middle school presentations, we don't really bring it up. Our college level presentations, we do, and we partner with an organization called Taco that does pretty much most of what they do is distributes fentanyl test strips on college campuses. And the awareness that that has raised, we think, has really turned things down. So um, I was really, I've had, I'm really impressed by the people who are in this space and the compassion that they have, no matter where they kind of plant their flag on those four pillars. Um, and that the more we can all kind of work together and draw on each other's experiences and expertise, I think the more people we can help. Marcia, what do you got?
Um, so one thing is an answer to the question, but it's also a plug for something that's coming up soon. One of the things we've worked with the recovery community a lot on is National Fentanyl Awareness Day, and that's coming up on April 29th. And I think that is one of the Song for Charlie initiatives where you really actively see all the elements of those four pillars really coming together to say we need to work together to raise awareness about this. One interesting dynamic that the recovery community brought to this was uh, the need to educate people in recovery about fentanyl, because a lot of people who are in recovery got into recovery before there were this massive fake pills. So making sure that they are aware of this ever-changing landscape. And I would argue that fake pills are just the first of a lot of things that the recovery community really needs to make sure that they're understanding with the evolving drug landscape and all of these new chemicals that are constantly being thrown into the drug supply. The other item that you will find information about on Song for Charlie's website is National Fentanyl Awareness Day. And if you want to use that as an excuse, sort of a news hook, an opportunity to call people together, to educate people on fentanyl, you will find all the resources that you need there. We have social media, uh, uh, what's the word I'm looking for, Ed? Social media posts.
Assets, posts,
Yes,
yeah, yeah.
posts. Yes, a very, very big word, posts. Social media posts that are ready to go that people can automatically share, links to all of the films we talked about, letters for businesses to send to people to educate their workforce on this. And we also are going to be hosting 3 webinars that day that we're going to be releasing information about, so people can also engage their community around one of those webinars. And if you can't join it live, we'll also be recording it so people can watch them at a time that's more convenient.
Thank you. That really does, bring all those areas into play. And as a state, as the state has been involved with distribution of test strips, either fentanyl or xylazine, it does bring back the idea that there are not every person that uses has a disorder with that substance. And some people are willing to test because they are recreationally doing something that would not be recommended, but yet it could save them. And there are some that are willing. So,
Yeah.
we've been involved in Department of Office of Behavioral Health with xylazine test strips. Other departments like the CDC have been involved with fentanyl test strips. So there are people in the community that consider it a valuable resource for sure. One other topic that we had talked about was, with all of these things in consideration, how do we as a group and then individually kind of lean in and lean on the issue and the weight of the issue of what's going on in the world today and the stress that may cause, and that general overwhelmed feeling that many of us have, and how do we not lean into substance use, and how do we convey that message in all areas? And you covered them all in your PowerPoint, right? Workplace, schools, churches, how do we help people feel like it's going to be okay? More
Well,
philosophical question.
yeah, and I'm just kind of like brainstorming and riffing here a little bit, which is when we speak to faith leaders, we learn a couple of things. One, that it's important that we work together to tailor the messaging so that it's appropriate for that faith tradition. So there are abstinence-only faith traditions. There are others that are moderation faith traditions. And so off the shelf might work a little bit better for a school district or across school districts across the country. We feel like there probably needs to be more engagement between us as kind of communications professionals, subject matter experts, and faith community leaders to get things right for their communities. And so we would really like to do that. And in general, in this time where people are stressed out, and there's a lot of different issues vying for people's attention, right? Especially in faith communities. Um, I think it makes sense for people in our space to not try to compete, to not say, I know the Jewish community is worried about the rise of anti-Semitism, but our issue is just as important. Eh, I think it is reminding people that it is in times of stress and anxiety and worry about things that people may be tempted to turn to substances. So, in addition to everything else you're doing, how can we make it as light a lift as possible to prepare you when the questions come about substance use and addiction and these new experiences parents and families and loved ones are having, um, because everything's changed so rapidly. I don't know why my kid is acting so bizarrely. Well, you may not know what kratom is, and you may not find anything around the house that gives you any warning signs or any indication that they're using no paraphernalia, and yet your kid is having a hard time because he's taking kratom and you don't know it. So that's kind of my philosophical take, and I put it in the context of today's conversation around faith communities, where there are a lot of big issues that faith communities deal with and that their people are concerned with. And it's not our place to come in there and try and say our issue is just as important or more important. It's complementary over here. It's important because of the other things. Am I saying that right, Marcia?
Yeah, I think you raise a really great point, Ed. And that's, we know after natural disasters like Hurricane Katrina or world events like 9/11, when there is a high level of stress and anxiety just in the world, in the ether, and people's every day becomes overwhelmed by it, we know that substance use rates skyrocket. And we know that with a drug landscape like the one we have right now, that means that overdoses will also rise. So I think it's really important for faith leaders, community leaders, whomever, to be attuned to that. And we are at this sort of high vibration stress time right now. And especially with added economic pressures on people, we know that that's a driver for use as well. So it's really, this is a time when we need to be talking about these issues, as Ed said, not to sort of say our issue is more important, but just to say, hey, we need to make sure people have the healthy coping tools. And there's a child psychologist that Ed and I have become groupies of, and her name's Lisa D'Amour, and she's fantastic. If you haven't checked out her podcast, you should. And she talks about appropriate responses to different things that happen. So, if your beloved family dog dies and your kid spirals and is listening to sad music for weeks, that's normal, and that's a good thing for the kid to have an appropriate response. If there's no sort of bad thing that's happened, then you worry. But mental health is not good. Mental health is not the absence of sadness or anger or any feelings. It's sort of having appropriate right-sized reactions to the things that happen in life. And I think that we need to make sure that we all kind of are armed with good coping skills and good healthy ways of dealing with all the bumps in the road and the ups and downs that we're experiencing right now as a society, so that we can weather those storms in healthier ways. So this is something that, it's there's the right now issue, but there's the how do we sort of have this in a sustained way? And I always compare it to eating our vegetables. It's not something anyone gets excited about doing, but we all know we need to eat our vegetables. And, the prevention conversations, the healthy coping conversations are the broccoli of, our world, that we just have to make sure we're doing that and keeping up with it, so that we can sustain ourselves through these really challenging times when they come.
You just need a little butter and salt. So
Exactly.
we have just a couple of minutes left. There's one question about, is there work A Song for Charlie is doing to help medical providers with improving the way in which painkillers are prescribed? So in just the last couple of minutes, do you have any perspective on that, any experience?
Again, a great question. The answer is no and yes. When you think about experts who we would like to make sure are informed about what's going on with the new chemical drug landscape in the illicit market, doctors, medical providers, pediatricians are right up there with faith communities. So we have just developed a toolkit like the Faith Community Toolkit for healthcare providers. It does not delve into proper prescribing, over prescribing of legitimate medications. That's just outside our expertise. It's outside our lane. What it does is it makes sure that it tries to help doctors understand when you do prescribe oxy to a kid who's been injured, they need to know that if you run out of these and go off script, that's a super dangerous behavior that you need to avoid. So we do have resources for that audience, for that group. We'd like to get that going as well. Love any support there. It just focuses on our topic.
That well, I think we're going to just wind it down. I want to thank again Ed and Marcia for spending time with us today. It's so much, vital information, and yet also exploring, what doors this opens for that other support, whether it's, telling the young people to eat their broccoli. It's really about, like you said, I really enjoyed that comment of the more we know, the more we know, and there are so many things that if you plant that seed, even of a thought, that can develop into somebody taking the right turn on a choice, which is often that moment of truth is a choice somebody makes. So thank you again. All participants, feel free to reach out to Ed or Marcia. They will help you directly. And I want to, again, do a shout out to Gordon Smith, who was not able to make it today. And we hope Gordon is enjoying a long holiday weekend. and he's always missed when he doesn't make these usual webinars. But tune in next month when we have our May topic, and remember on your calendars the Opioid Summit in July 16th in Bangor, Maine, and we're expecting a wonderful event, for the final of the 8-year run of the Governor Mills administration. So we're really looking forward to that, and additional webinars will continue into June, and then following the summit in August through the rest of the year. So it's been a great event today. Thank you again, and thank you everybody for participating.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much.